the United States and NATO reject signing a bilateral agreement on security in Europe with Russia and also closing the door on the future incorporation of Ukraine into the Atlantic Alliance. Those were two of the main demands presented by Moscow to put an end to the crisis in Ukraine at a moment of maximum tension between Russia and the West and that threatened Euro-Atlantic security. By contrast, both Washington and the alliance offer Putin negotiations on disarmament agreements and trust-building measures in different forums such as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the US-Russia Strategic Stability Dialogue, and the NATO-Russia Council, the success of which are conditioned on the start of a de-escalation of the Russian military threat to Ukraine. That is according to two confidential documents sent last Wednesday by Washington and NATO to Moscow, and to which ELPA has had access. Considering the substantial, unprovoked, unjustified, and ongoing Russian military buildup in and around Ukraine and in Belarus, we call on Russia to immediately de-escalate the situation in a verifiable, timely, and lasting manner. NATO states it is the position of the United States government that progress can only be achieved on these issues in an environment of de-escalation with respect to Russia threatening actions towards Ukraine, warns Washington. The Russian authorities demanded a written response to their proposal to sign a deal that gave security guarantees to Moscow regarding the expansion of NATO to the east. Moscow even included a draft version of the hypothetical deal. The response was two texts, one titled Confidential/Rel Russia, consisting of an introduction, 7 points and some brief conclusions on the part of Washington, and another, under the heading NATO Russia Restricted, with 12 sections, from the Atlantic Alliance. The messages that the Western leaders have conveyed in public to the texts capture to a large extent, albeit in a much more detailed form, Kremlin. The US and NATO have coordinated their responses, which are complementary but do contain some differences. The main difference between both texts is that Washington is prepared to discuss the concept of indivisibility of security, which the OSCE approved at its summit in Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan in 2010. Moscow has included this in the first article in its draft deal, using this principle to allege that the eventual entry of Ukraine into NATO would affect its security. The text from the US warns that it does not share the Russian point of view and notes that the concept of indivisibility of security cannot be viewed in isolation. Even so, it expresses willingness to deal with the respective interpretations of the same, and it points out that the United States and Russia also reaffirmed the inherent right of each and every participating state to be free to choose or change its security arrangements, including treaties of alliance. From the beginning, the document from Washington makes clear that it continues to firmly support NATO open door policy, and so does not exclude the future incorporation of Ukraine or Georgia into the alliance. And it clarifies that whatever the case, this issue should be dealt with at the NATO-Russia Council (NRC). The NATO text also reinforces its open door policy and underlines the right of all states to choose their agreements in terms of security free from outside interference. Moscow is yet to send a written reply, but allied sources say that Russia has called on the United States and NATO to unify their responses and for the latter to agree to a discussion of the concept of indivisibility of security, as the US has done.
So discussed and exchanged opinions regarding Russian proposals given to the US and NATO about giving long-term security guarantees to Russia. And I would like to say that we analyze the response given in writing by the US on 26th of January, but now it's already clear, and I said that to Mr. Prime Minister, that Russian concerns were basically ignored. We didn't see an adequate response to our key concerns: non-expansion of NATO, the refusal to deploy offensive weapons next to the Russian borders, and bringing back the military infrastructure of the alliance to the status quo of 1997, when the Russian-NATO treaty was signed. And by ignoring our concerns, the United States and NATO in general are referring to the rights of the states to freely choose ways to ensure one's security.